that. This is what happens when you haven't been streaming for a couple of weeks. And yes, no? Cool. Okay, good. So hopefully everything works well. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. That's odd. It should show up the other one as well. Give me a moment. Huh. Odd. Okay, that one works. Okay. Weird. Okay, now it comes up. Okay. Anyway. Hi. Things are somewhat organized. Yeah, I have made it back, as you can tell. No stream this past Tuesday, so like a week ago, because I was going to be leaving town Thursday morning at 6 a.m. So I had to be out of the house before 6 because I was meeting up with people and leaving from a central location at 6 in the morning. And so, because one of my jobs is doing overnight shifts, and they're 11 to 7, leaving at 6 in the morning on Thursday, which would be the Wednesday night shift. I couldn't do Wednesday night. And since our work week is basically Monday to Sunday, I basically had to do Monday night and Tuesday night as the only days I'd have available to do my shift. So I had to do Monday night and Tuesday night. And then from there, from there I would be doing and so I'd basically have Wednesday off to do whatever I needed to do before leaving bright and early on Thursday morning to head to Montreal. And so surprise, surprise, I survived Montreal. And I had fun. I always have fun doing conventions, like even when it's from the point of view of somebody working the retail booth. I always have fun. And I enjoy having an excuse to go to Montreal. And some people like it. Some people like to whine and complain about deal with it. Oh no, I'm going somewhere that's not somewhere I'm used to being. Try it. Anyway. Rumble, rumble, rumble. That being said, we got there. We got set up done faster than I expected. We got teardown. I was expecting 3 or 4 hours to do teardown. We were done in like an hour and a half. We were back before midnight Sunday night. If I was the kind of person that could actually turn around and do like, you know, only have a few hours sleep and then work for like 18 hours or whatever, I could have gone on my shift. I would have been, say an hour late for doing Sunday night, but I could have done Sunday night, you know, on top. Yeah, I'm not going to muck around with that. Like I said, I expected we'd be getting back like 1 or 2 in the morning. So I had already compensated for that. Anyway, um, but yes, now that I'm back, I would have handled Apocalypse, you know, last weekend. That wasn't going to happen because I had to work instead. That being said, my next one, two, three, four. It's probably going to be about 4 weeks that will run into the same problem. So the stream that starts 6 p.m. Eastern time on the night of August 5th, we're probably running into the same thing. Pay period ends here. This and this is one. Yeah, we'll probably run into the same thing there. And then again, back to Montreal for that for Otaku-san. If you get a chance to go, great. Um, the typical, convention type stuff will be going on there. Has it got a thing here about vendors or no? Might be under exhibition. Yeah, probably. Dealers area, click here. Oh, wow. That's it? That's actually less expensive than I thought it was going to be. Okay. Wow. Okay. Yeah, I do not see any quick and easy way to find out who is going to be there in terms of what retailers. Then again, it's still some time before it goes on. But if you get a chance to go to Montreal for the weekend of August, August 8th to 10th, um, I'm expecting to be there unless things hit the fan. But yeah, anyway. And then 2 weeks later, is Fan Expo, and that's a full 4-day event. Oh wow, Michael J. Fox is gonna. William Shatner. I guess I shouldn't be surprised that he's gonna be back. He was actually at Montreal for Montreal Comic Con, so I guess I shouldn't be completely surprised. Mike Tyson, that's kind of entertaining. Jodie Whittaker, Christopher Lloyd, Heather Locklear. I remember she used to be a really big thing back in the day. Michael Rosenbaum, Ron Perlman. Wow. Catherine Tate. There's actually a lot of names that I recognize on this list, which is a little surprising because when I saw the list, like, because of stuff that I am interested in, there tends to be, a relatively small list of names that I recognize, and I'm looking at this and it's like, hey Yargo, Yargo, are you here to bargle? But yeah, I don't know if you noticed or not. No stream last week because I had to be ready for Montreal Comic Con, which was this past weekend, and that was fun. Um, and I have been asked by my LGS if I'm able to make it to Otaku-san, which again will be in Montreal in about 4 weeks. And then 2 weeks after that will be Fan Expo in Toronto. And I'm from the Toronto area, so that's relatively easy to get to. Ooh. Sorry to hear that, mate. I hope I know when my father passed away, he was in his 80s. This is about a decade ago. Um, I was, my brain was ready for it, but the rest, like, I know I still have to properly grieve for it. So, um, I hope I hope what you and your family have to go through for it is in that context. I hope it's easier on you. Um, yeah, death in the family is never a fun time. I hope you guys. I hope you're able to. Um, I hope you're able to get your grieving out in a way that's useful for everyone involved. um, no, I get it. I get it. I hope your grieving's able, like, you guys are able to grieve in a way that's useful for everyone involved, but you're able to move on relatively. Like, I don't want you to, like, I, cause there, you know how some people are, it's like, it'll take them, like, 10 years or more to be able to move on with their life. Oh, oh, yeah. Yep. Yeah. Well, the one thing I noticed when I pulled this up is for stuff that is exactly white in the set, there's only 12 cards, so I'm going to be covering all of them. And Helionaut, I remember thinking Helionaut was so cool when it came out because how often do you actually see actual mana fixing in white of any sort? Like you get Fairlight Priest, which can filter some stuff into white. Yeah, Tarkir Dragonstorm had them for the relevant. The devotees had them for the relevant clans. and highly unusual. Though in that case, there it kind of makes sense, but it's still weird. It's kind of like giving green flyers, and if you're playing heavily with dragons, then every color's got to get its own dragons, and then green gets big chunky flying boys. But beyond that, green doesn't really get flying creatures. So Helionaut, I saw that. I saw the same sort of thing. Like, this is something that white doesn't get. Yeah, kinda. And if you're playing, like, especially if you're just playing with commons, like a bunch of my decks are, as I know I've mentioned to you. I'm sure you're aware of this. Um, and you decide you really want to go like 3 colors. If you're not playing green, Helionaut's going to do a lot of heavy lifting. If you're nowadays, I would say if you're going 3 colors and you're not playing green and you're playing with just commons, you probably want to go wedge because that gives you access to Helionaut and access to, I think it's the uh, Mardu Devotee or the Jeskai Devotee. Or actually, no, you could get white, green, black, Abzan Devotee. One of those 3. No, you want the one that's centered on white. You want Mardu. Oh yeah. Also, the fact that it's flying, it has flying, is not to be overlooked. Because that will actually, the fact that it's a relatively inexpensive flying creature is not to be overlooked. Plus, I will point out, it does have 2 relevant creature types. I think it's better than most people give it credit for. I think it does more than most people give it credit for. It's generally not at the top of most people's list, but it's still like depending on what kind of on what you need, you may turn around and find Helionaut and go, that is actually exactly the kind of effect I need. I think back then I would have preferred it to be a 2/2 or a 1/3, but either way, I'm like, especially when you're looking at a deck that's heavy on white and want to be able to splash for kicker costs, Helionaut would have been a great pickup. False Dawn. Yep. Good luck, mate. And very, very much good luck to you and your family dealing with what happened. False Dawn, now that, what do you call it? Panoptic Mirror has been unbanned. And I think it's on the Game Changer list, but now that it's been unleashed onto Commander, because it's been banned for a very, very long time. Like well over a decade, probably more like 20 years. False Dawn. False Dawn, you put that on Panoptic Mirror, you end up with 2 things. One, you're drawing an extra card every turn. 2, you basically get to cast anything as though it's... Basically, you get treat anything as though it's a white card. I will point out, however, that it only affects like colored mana symbols, like colored costs. So you're not going to be able to replace the, like for example, Eldrazi Displacer has a cost here that involves a colorless mana symbol, and you have to specifically represent. You have to specifically have colorless mana for it. False Dawn is not going to help with that. But anywhere where you have a colored mana symbol for a cost, you get to spend white mana as though it were that color. And that helps with mana generation and with spending the mana. But in combination with Panoptic Mirror, the worst that is, tap 2, draw a card. By the way, you're not going to, apart from colorless mana symbols, you're not going to have mana issues. Incidentally, this says if something would add colored mana, it adds white mana instead. Sol Ring will still produce colorless mana. Deca Sanctuary. There's a cycle of sanctuaries. This Apocalypse, from what I remember, is basically realistically the first set that really cared about like one color and the two that oppose it. Let's see if I can pull up Magic the Gathering card back. Open image, a new tab. This is a pentagram shape, obviously. You can kind of think of it like a circle. Basically, you grab one color, draw a line straight down the middle, and the two that are closest to the middle on the opposite side are your opposing colors. So white gets red and black. Blue, draw a straight line through here. You get, on this side, you get red and green. Black, straight line through. You get white and green. Red, straight line through the middle. You get white and blue. Green, straight line through the center. You get blue and black. So every color has two that oppose it. The sanctuaries, well, sure, let's try this again. Wedges are basically the three color combination that are the one color plus the two that oppose it. That's a wedge because if you look at it, it basically makes a triangle. It's like a triangle shape. Of like a wedge of cheese, for example. You can think about it that way. Or when people are cutting cake, it's not unheard of for somebody to say it's being cut into wedges. Apocalypse really was the first set that actually cared about wedges. There's previous sets that did something to do with it, but this was like a big deal. I think prior to then, I was just trying to show off the different options for multicolored, multicolor combinations, and now it's like, no, this is a wedge. This is a big thing that we're basing the set around. Okay. And originally, you see something like Dega Sanctuary. It's like, well, where did Mardu come from? And, Mardu and Abzan and all that. Well, those came much later when we got Konzatark here. And so typically, when we were referring to the three color combination, in this case, I'll be talking about white, black, and red. We would either say, white, black, red, or, WBR is how we might write it down. Or we might use the name that came up from things like the sanctuaries. In this case, Daga. Only a couple of those really felt like they actually stuck. Like Necra was, I think, black, which would make it basically Abzan. Black, white, and green, I think. Anna, I think, was base blue. But for the most part, we would just, like, you'd get, like, Grixis commonly got written down as, I think it was Grixis, no. Teamer, sorry, commonly got written down as bug because it made a word. B for black, U for blue, because that's the common abbreviation, the common single letter abbreviation for blue. And G for green. No, that wasn't Teamer, that was, sorry, Sultai. And Teamer got rug, same reasoning. It's just R for red. R, red, blue, green. So basically blue, green plus black gave you bug. Blue, green plus red gave you rug. But a lot of the other ones would just get like, here's your 3 letters to describe what colors, you would write it out as just simply, WGU or WG or GWU. I think eventually was the common way that you'd see it, etc., etc. Which we'd eventually call band. But we wouldn't have actual proper names that people realistically used for 3 color combinations until we got Shards of Alara, where the shards were a big deal. And a lot of cards had the relevant shard name. And Konzatark here, which held the wedges, where a lot of cards had the relevant wedge name. Anyway. But back in the day, if you were to use a name for the 3 color combination that was white, red, and black, it was Dega, which is where these came from. So, beginning of your upkeep, if you control a red or black permanent, you gain 2 life. If you've got both, 1 of each, you gain 4. Being able to come up with permanents that have the other 2 colors is not difficult, even if you're playing mono, because, like, let's go to my mono green burn deck for a sec, which, again, still needs some work. However, I have, this is a mono green deck that has 5 cards whose job it is there specifically is to make tokens that are white or red. They're allowed to be other colors, they just have to be at least white or red. And, you're looking at, I've got 5 cards that fit in a mono green deck that can make tokens that are red or white. You're playing a white deck. You want to make a black token of something or a red token of something. You might have to go to artifacts to do it, but it's not that difficult. You know. Like there's Sarpadian Empires Volume 7. Incidentally, this is a hilarious note. If you're naming white, you're making citizen tokens. If you're blue, makes Cameron. Black tokens are thralls. If you do red, you're making goblin tokens, and green gets saplings. While 4 of these tokens have since been printed, no Cameron token has ever been printed. They need to make Cameron tokens still. Anyway, that being said, that is an easy way to get a token of the relevant color in a play that you can toss in a mono white deck. It's not the only way, it's not the easiest way, but it is a way to do it. And red and black should be relatively easy to do, because if you want something that makes goblin tokens, for example, they're generally going to be red. And if you want something that makes, and if you're looking at something where you pay life, the token that you're making is probably black. Phyrexian Processor, for example, comes to mind. 4 mana, as it enters, pay any amount of life. 4 tap, create an XX black Phyrexian minion creature token where X is the amount of life paid as this artifact entered. Basically, the token's as big as the amount of life that you paid. In a commander game, it's not completely unreasonable to pay, 10 life. And then you start making, you go 4 tap, make 10 10s. But that's probably the easiest way to come up with a token. Or just a black permanent in general. In a mono white deck, red is the one that might require a little more work. But there are ways to do it. This will check on your upkeep if you control at least 1. I believe when the ability goes to resolve is when it checks. It'll check again. And then it'll say, oh, you have both. Okay, well then you gain 4. Again, this is one of those cards where it's there to gain you life. Which is more important? A number of small instances of gaining life, or less instances of gaining more life. If you're to gain 10 life during the course of a turn, which is more relevant to your deck? Gain 10 life at once, or 10 instances of gaining 1 life each? This, I believe, would fit more into the, into the second camp, because this happens every turn, like each of your turns. You're getting a small amount of life, but it's a consistent life gain trigger. A card like a Johnny's Pride Mate, if you were playing a black-white life gain deck, a black-white deck that cares about gaining life, and you're running a card like Bloodthirsty Aerialist. Incidentally, most people do not realize this art is upside down. She should actually be turned. The art should actually be turned 180 degrees. If you're able to do that on your phone or your monitor or whatever, you'll see what it looks like, and now some of this makes more sense because whatever this is a thing that's dangling. These are, you know, I mean, I want to say curtains. They're not curtains or drapes, but they're like, they're part of her costume. They're not supposed to be coming down upward. They're supposed to be coming down towards the floor, which means she's upside down. These are candles that, no, they're not candles that are pointing down. They're candles that are pointing up. The picture is upside down. I don't know if they realized that when they put the on the card. I'm sure the artist knew. I'm not sure the people sending it to print did. Anyway, if you have a card like that, you're going to want a card along the lines of Dega Sanctuary, something that will regularly gain you life every turn. So, are you playing a life gain deck? Consider a card of a nature like Dega Sanctuary. If you're also playing red in that deck, for whatever reason, then yeah, it's conceivable that you might actually want Dega Sanctuary. You can gain a reasonable amount of life every turn. I wouldn't play it in most decks, but I'd be looking at, if I know if I'm building a Abzan, I know if I'm building a deck that cares about getting life, something Soul Sisters based or whatever. Am I playing red or black in addition to white? I might want to think about. If I'm playing both, then suddenly Dega Sanctuary ends up being a lot more relevant. Coalition Honor Guard sees a small amount of Pauper play. The 1 mana 1/1 version is more relevant in Pauper. This is basically a 4 mana 2/4 at common that says, oh, you're trying to target something? You have to target at least this. What? You have to target at least this. What do you mean? So, if something has, let's say, 3 targets. Actually, let's go for another card that existed around this time frame. Let's go with Hull Breach. No, sorry, not Hull Breach. Decimate. Let's go for the original print. There's nothing wrong with the others. It's just I want to go for the original print, which we'll be covering in a couple more episodes. Decimate. You need to be able to target an artifact, a creature, an enchantment, and a land with it. Barring shenanigans, that means if you want to cast this and a card like Coalition Honor Guard is sitting out, Coalition Honor Guard is going to be the creature that you have to target. You're still free to choose whatever artifact, enchantment, and land you want, but you have to target a creature, and again, barring shenanigans like Mycosynth Lattice, turning everything into artifacts, or Enchanted Evening, turning everything into an enchantment, or stuff of that nature. You have to target Coalition Honor Guard as one of the things. You have to choose Coalition Honor Guard as one of the targets. Now, why is it that way? You have to target at least one flag bearer. Flag bearer is a creature type. If this is in play and there's anything that's got changeling, they don't have to target this. They can target one of the changelings. The honor guard stays. This also only affects opponents casting or activating stuff. You are free to do whatever you want. Your opponents, on the other hand, have to choose at least one flag bearer. Now, to be fair, there's a lot of changelings that see play just as a matter of course, because the fact that they're a changeling doesn't matter. The rest of what they are is relevant. So, changeling outcast, for example. The fact that it's got changeling doesn't actually matter. It can't block and it can't be blocked. Relevant to that is it can't be blocked, so people are going to people are going to use it to make sure they can get damage through of one type or another. And, with curiosity to draw extra cards, with grafted skullcap, not skullcap, grafted exoskeleton to deal poison damage or something. So there's Changeling Outcast. There's that one that sees play in elf decks all the time. It's a shapeshifter, with the Changeling type. But when it comes into play, you can exile a card from your graveyard. I can't remember the name of it. Type no. Oh, changeling, mana value less than 4, mana value greater than 1. Because it's either a 2-drop or a 3-drop. ID equal green, O exile, O graveyard, O artifact, O enchantment. Masked Vandal. Often sees play in elf decks because it has changeling. It's an elf in all zones. Comes into play, you can exile a creature card from your graveyard. If you do, you blow up. It's basically naturalize, but exile. It's basically exile naturalize. Oh, wow. Huh. Anyway. So, there's a few changelings that see play just as a matter of course. Well, with one of these out, anytime your opponent tries to cast a spell or activate an ability, if it has targets, they have to target something that either has the flag bearer type, which this does, or is a flag bearer due to other reasons, such as, having changeling. That being said, Maskwood Nexus, if somebody's got Maskwood Nexus in play, suddenly everything they have is a flag bearer. So their stuff can be targeted, no problem. Again, there are times when creature type is relevant. Yeah, I expect this to see some amount of commander play if you want an inexpensive way to protect some of your creatures. Again, there's another version of it that will come to soon. Coalition flag. Coalition flag is basically one mana aura that does what Coalition Honor Guard. It basically takes what Coalition Honor Guard is and gives that to any creature. So hilariously, you can turn around and throw this on somebody else's general and go, hey, by the way, this is a flag bearer and it has that fun little flag bearer ability now. Wait, what? Yeah, it's a flag bearer. It's got that fun little flag bearer ability. So, if you need to choose a creature or permanent or whatever, you have to choose a flag bearer. Oh, I'm sorry, I have to kill your general because it's the only flag bearer in play. So it's kind of a delayed removal spell. Um, yeah, would would have no problem playing a card like this over a card like Pacifism. Although Pacifism has been power crept out, finally. I can't believe how long it's taken to actually power creep out Pacifism itself. But anyway. uh would not complain if somebody played something like that. I'm like, wait, you're doing what? Okay, that's completely unexpected. I'm all for it. Go for it. Enlistment officer. Are you playing soldiers? You should run enlistment officer. 4 mana for 2/3 first strike. I would say you're paying 3 mana for that. You're paying an extra mana for its come into play ability. Reveal the top 4 cards of your library. Put all the soldiers revealed this way in your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. Which means you get to sort the order they go in. You don't have to shuffle and put them on the bottom. No, you can go, no, okay, this one, and then this one, and then this one, and I keep this one. Or whatever. However it turns out. Also, the fact that this is a come into play ability. Sorry, enter the battlefield ability. Means that you can use cards like Eldrazi Displacer and flicker it every turn. And basically for 3 mana you get its come into play ability again. You might want to run a handful of non-soldiers in your soldier deck to be able to pull off shenanigans like that. It is never wrong to have a tribal deck where some of your cards are not of that type. As an example, my Persistent Petitioners advisor mill deck. I have 44 advisors. I have a couple extra creatures in here. I've got Ormos, Archive Keeper, and Sphinx of the Chimes that are not advisors. It's okay to have a couple in there that, in my opinion, if you want enough cards to fit a tribal theme or typal or kindred or whatever the term is these days. I'm sorry. We've been using tribal for about 30 years. Goblin tribal was was the term being used before Fallen Empires, I think, even came out. Um, Realistically, was the only one that actually did it. But that might also, I think the reason tribal got picked up as the word was because the very first one would have been goblins, realistically. Goblins were the only one that actually had any sort of support as a creature type in enough quantities to make it playable. And decent enough to actually be playable in the, because you can have enough to make it playable in terms of quantity, but then there's also the quality. Are you running a 1 mana for, are you running a 1 mana 1/1 with nothing going for it apart from the fact that it's got the relevant creature type? Find something else. But I think tribal got picked up because goblins, considering that Magic the Gathering was originally based kind of on Dungeons and Dragons, and goblins very much were perceived to have a tribal makeup. You talked about goblin tribes, as opposed to dwarves that would have clans, for example. I think that's where the idea of using the word tribe came from. And then eventually it got applied to other creature types and then expanded to being a generic term. Don't quote me on that. That's what I think happened. Anyway, I have trouble getting past, I have trouble calling it anything other than tribal, because to me tribal makes sense. And if you want to sound off in the comments and say, well, it should be called this or that or whatever, I'm not going to say you're wrong. I'm not going to say I think you're wrong or anything like that. But it's like, for example, I have a friend, and I'm not going to mention names or anything like that. They deserve some privacy and whatever. Who I had known for probably 15 or 20 years as he. And this person eventually went through gender reassignment, which I think is a terrible term, because it sounds like that term to me gives me the feel of you are now no longer allowed to be this. You now have to be that. Which I think is I get, I understand it. I just hate the expression. But that's a me thing. Anyway, they eventually went for surgery to be, the relevant surgery and hormone therapy and everything else to become a woman. And so is now she. And this person had for a very, very long time been in my phone as, under a male name. And I eventually turned it into, male name / female name. so I could get used to seeing the female name on my phone when I tried calling them, or if they tried messaging me or whatever. And I eventually flipped, I think earlier this year, I think it was, I flipped the two names around. Now, I've known this person for probably over 20 years by now. But it's taken some time to get used to. Like, I'm now constantly referring to them by their, I'm telling other people, you know, this is this is what their name is, you know, with the name that they use now. Because I don't. Here's the thing. I believe that, you know, if you want to go by a given name, what right does anybody have to tell you otherwise? If you want to be called Frankenstein, I will call you Frankenstein. If you are happy being called Frankenstein, I will call you Frankenstein. You know, if you want to be called Tobias and, you were born with female parts or whatever, I don't care. You want to be called Tobias? I will call you Tobias. Using that name because it's the one on my screen. You know, I've had I've had at least two teachers turn around and say to me they want me to call them by their first name. One was while they were my teacher, and one was after graduation. Or not after graduation, but like after my final exams were over, and that was the last year they were going to be my teacher. She turned around and said, "Oh, by the way, my name is." Um, I've there are certain times when people will turn around, you're used to calling them or you're used to thinking of them being named a certain way. And now you're getting told, well, no, I want you to call me this way. Um, my, I had a family member who was involved in scouting, and I met the scout leader, and he wanted me to call him by his first name. At that point, I wasn't, I don't think I was even a teenager yet. I think I was like late, I think I was 10, 11, 12, somewhere around there. Probably closer to 10. And, my family member was like, and my parents were like, well, you should be calling the scout leader by, the proper title, Mr., Mrs., Ms., whatever, and their last name. And I'm like, but I've just been told by the person we're talking about, no, call me by my first name. My personal opinion is if there is a name you want me to call you, I will call you by that name. It might take some effort to get used to remembering what name it is, but I will call you by that. Anyway, all that is to say, I've been using the term tribal. Like that's been in magic parlance for about 30 years. It is going to take effort for me to get used to calling it something else. It doesn't mean I'm not willing to change. I'm saying it's going to take some time and it's going to take some effort because for me it's a new thing. It's like it's like breaking an old habit. But now to rewind back to where that was coming up. In my opinion, if you're building a commander deck and you're building something that's tribal based, um, something that's like 25-ish cards of that tribe is a good place to start. More than that is nice, but about a quarter of the deck being the relevant creature type is a really good starting point. The other one I have is Shroom Sphinx Bidding, which again, here's 26 Sphinxes. And yes, I have a handful of cards that are like Urtai Resurrected is not a Sphinx. He's a Phyrexian human wizard. Okay. Bringer of the Last Gift is a vampire demon. Magister of Worth is an angel. Yes, I pronounce it Magister because I took Latin. Hey, Holly. Adaptive Automaton will be a Sphinx when it comes, once it comes into play. Brass Herald is a golem. Runetail is a fox monk. Safara is an angel. Bogwitch is a human spell shaper. These are all things that are not Sphinxes, but I've got 26 Sphinxes plus my commander. So that's generally, I figure that's in general about enough. And again, if you have more, great. You don't need more. If you were trying to decide between two cards and one is the relevant creature type and the other isn't, and there's no good reason to choose one over the other, choose the one that's the relevant creature type. Sometimes the one that's not the relevant creature type has got some other minor bonus. If it's not really enough for you to actually care about, go with the one that's the relevant creature type. But, yeah, enlistment officer, if you're playing soldiers, I say play it. Divine Light. Prevent all damage from being dealt this turn to creatures you control. The fun thing about Divine Light, I would not play this generally in a mono white deck. But if you're adding red or adding black and you're playing with cards along the lines of Chain Reaction or Star of Extinction or anything of that sort of nature, you cast this first, then you do your damage-based mass removal. Yeah, but here's the thing. It doesn't say combat damage. It just says damage. You're running black, Pestilence, or, for those people that like playing with commons, Crypt Rats. Then you attack once the board's clean. Oh yeah, this is one of those. This in combination with something else is a This like this in combination with some kind of damage based wrath effect is basically in Garrick's wake, and then you attack. So I mean again, it depends on how you build your deck. Using it as a sorcery speed, holy day slash fog is fine. But if you're considering playing this card, consider playing with other cards that deal damage on a mass scale. you know, consider playing with cards. Yeah, that's what I was saying. Starve Extinction. You do this and then Starve Extinction, and then you swing at your opponents and just cackle maniacally because their creatures are all dead, even their giant Eldrazi's or whatever. Probably dead. And just go, cool. Pump spell? Like, I don't know, not Glorious Anthem. Uh, God damn it. I can never remember the name of it. 3 mana. Glorious Charge? No. No, it doesn't start with a G. Or, no, it does start with a G, but it's not Glorious. Guardian's Pledge. You know, sure, now you're looking at like. But you could just use Chain Reaction and will probably have the same effect for the most part. And so now you're looking at like 7, 8. You're looking at 8 mana, but it's like clear the entire board, attack everybody else, and probably kill 2 people in the process. And if you have like True Conviction out, yeah, but now you're looking at like 12 mana at least. No, Relentless Assault I think is 5, isn't it? So wouldn't that be or am I misremembering that one? There's one that's 4. No, okay, Relentless Assault is the 4 mana one. I know that ability tends to be 5. Oh, yes. For those that are confused about that, there's a years ago, and I don't know if this is still the thing or not. Holly would be able to tell me better. There used to be a commercial for a place up in, I think it's north and west of Toronto, called Acton, and the shop was called the Old Hide House, where you could buy like leather jackets, and basically leather was their big thing, but like jackets and belts and typical gloves, the sort of stuff where you want made out of like heavy leather or something of that nature. If you went horseback riding, for example, you might want some of their stuff, or motorcycle. Something that they also did suede. I think they did lambskin as well. And the big time tagline was "It's worth a drive to Acton." But yeah, anything of that sort of nature. To be fair, we're talking like 20 or 30 years ago. Do not know if they still exist. Do not know if they still use that tagline, but that used to be a thing. Anyway, standard bearer. This goes back to what I was saying before about Coalition Honor Guard and Coalition Flag. This is just the more cost efficient version to get the same ability. It's a 2 mana 1/1 with that ability. I think if I would generally, and I'm people may call me crazy. I mean, they'll call me crazy regardless. I would probably generally run the honor guard first because it's a decent sized body, and then the standard bearer and the coalition flag. If I wanted something, if I'm considering playing the coalition flag, I'm not throwing it on one of my own creatures. I'm throwing it on an opponent's threat. I'd be like, no, no, no. If you're going to blow up a creature, you have to blow that up first. In that case, I'm using it, you know, it's more like I'm forcing people to direct their hate that way rather than towards my stuff. Whereas the standard bearer and the coalition honor guard, I'm playing those to protect my stuff. You have to kill this before you can kill that. Coalition flag, I'm like, oh, you want to blow up a creature? You're going to have to kill that one. Haunted Angel. So there's not really much to say about standard bearer, apart from the fact that it's the least expensive way to do that. I would probably run the honor guard first because for 4 mana you do get a 2/4, which is a reasonable sized body that can jump in front of a lot of stuff. Because the standard bearer, the problem with the standard bearer is it dies to a stiff breeze. So, you know, in combat, it'll die to, going up against like a rat or a mouse or a very slightly pumped kobold. Haunted Angel was hilarious. Back in the day, like when this card was created, the funny thing about Haunted Angel was that even though your opponents created the tokens, you controlled the ability that made the tokens. So you could use an effect like Brand to gain control of all those tokens. They eventually changed that, I think, with M10. And a lot of people were sad about that. But shrug, we survived. It's now you're creating the token unless an effect says otherwise. You're creating the token, it's your token. You control it, you own it, etc. So, the the only real reason to play this now is if giving your opponents tokens is actually relevant. And that is a thing that can happen. If you have a card like, Trespasser's Curse, or something similar to that effect. Whenever a creature enchanted player controls enters, that player loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. Curses are enchantments where you target a specific person when you cast them. They enter and attach to that player, just like an aura with enchant creature comes into play and you attach it to the relevant creature and it targets that creature when you cast it. Curses, same idea. except you're attaching it to a player. But if you have enough of this style of effect where creatures entering under somebody else's control, there's some kind of drawback. Or, good lord, what do you call it? You're the soul sister that can ping, ping opponents for their stuff entering. What do you call it? I don't see you. Why don't I see you? I know the card I'm thinking of. It's the Soul Sister that can ping opponents for their stuff coming into play. Suture Priest. Yeah. Whenever a creature an opponent controls enters, you may have that player lose 1 life. Yeah. So if you've got an effect like that, you know, that and Trespasser's Curse and a few of those other kind of effects, sure, you guys all get angels. And they're going to burninate you. And they're going to burninate you. And you can make your opponent burninate from other stuff too. Anyway, that being said, unless you're doing something like that, for 3 mana, you can get a 3/3 flying even with angel type. I know for 4 mana you can get 3/4 flying flash and other stuff added onto it fairly easily. There's Restoration Angel, there's Angel Finality, and a few other things. So mana value equal 3, ID equal white, type equal angel, power equal 3, toughness equal 3. Yeah, Emancipation Angel, Resplendent Marshal, Resplendent Angel, Guardian of Girapur. Yeah, so you've already got at least 4, 4 3/3 flyers before you hit Haunted Angel as 3 mana 3/3 flying angels. So that doesn't mean you don't have a reason to play Haunted Angel, but make sure you have a reason to play Haunted Angel specifically if you're going to play it. Diversionary Tactics. There are certain cards that like to become tapped. I will constantly bring up this card. Scare Tiller. Whenever this creature becomes tapped, choose one. Putting a land from your hand into play tapped, or a land card from a graveyard enters tapped. Scare Tiller wants to become tapped. Suddenly, diversionary tactics in combination with a card like Scare Tiller, and there's a card that got previewed from Edge of Eternity. There, this guy, Chrome Companion. Whenever this creature becomes tapped, you gain 1 life. It's a 2 mana 2/1. Pay 2 and tap it. Return. Put target card from a graveyard on the bottom of its owner's library. You know, you have Chrome Companion and Scare Tiller out. You're tapping down your opponent's creatures and getting an extra land drop and gaining life. If you're considering playing with a card like this, see if your deck can make use of cards that want to be tapped anyway. My decks that are playing strictly commons, Scare Tiller is a big deal. Incidentally, I think I still need another one. Boop. No, I have my Scare Tillers. I'm good. I mean, there's... So you're thinking something... Dravi. Dravi is banned, isn't it? So you have access to, amongst other things, you have access to opposition, Angler of Subdual. You also have access to a bunch of stuff that gives you extra untap steps. Oh no. Geez. Give me a sec. Boop. Pop out. Pop out. Yeah. Give me a sec here. Where are you? This. I'm gonna do that. See if that helps settle things down a bit. Alright. Hopefully that helps. My computer seems to be getting a bit on the warm side, so having a restore. I might have to shut down and restart shortly. You know what? I'm going to try and finish off white quickly, and then I will shut down and restart. But yeah, Derevi, you're playing Bant. You have access to a lot of shenanigans to play with. And lots of stuff to give extra untapped steps as well. So, yeah. Um, Also, because you're playing white and green, lots of token generation if you want to play that route as well. So, you have options. Gerard Capuchin. Gerard Capuchin's ability can target a different opponent every turn. This might also be the kind of card, Holly, that you might want to consider throwing into Derevi. Because it's just, paying 4 mana to tap. Although there's probably more efficient ways to do it. Honestly, I pretty much see this as a decent body that can gain a reasonable amount of life every turn. I'm going to assume probably not unreasonable. Whoever you're choosing is probably, at that point, is going to have at least 5 or 6 cards in hand. I would probably assume that. At which point, if I'm assuming this is a card that gains me a healthy amount of life every turn, if I'm doing a life deck, I'm assuming this is a card that I'm playing because it gains me a healthy amount of life every turn. Again, the question of gaining 10 life every turn. Does the deck want me to gain 10 life at once? Or does the deck want 10 instances of gaining 1 life each? Well of Lost Dreams is more interested in the first. Johnny's Pridemate is more interested in the second. So there are different reasons to use either one. Generally speaking, 10 instances of gain 1 life are going to be more useful than 1 instance of gaining 10 life. But there are times when that's not going to be necessarily true. But that's how I would probably realistically end up playing this. Because unless Gerard is my general. If Gerard is my general, I'm probably building him as a Voltron deck, which kind of makes sense. Because, the entire Weatherlight saga, etc., etc., throwing a bunch of equipment on him makes sense, especially from a flavor perspective. Yeah, making him a Voltron general would make sense. And then just having ways to give him evasion and self-protection and what have you. Shield of Duty and Reason. If you have this on a creature, which is probably going to be your commander, and you have Akroma's Memorial out, the only color that can hit you is white. White is not a commonly played monocolored. It's generally played in combination with other stuff. Doesn't mean you can't play it otherwise. I'm just saying you're not likely to be playing it as is. Alright. I am going to be back in a few minutes. I'm going to reboot my computer. It was running. It's been running for the last 300, so almost 2 full weeks without being turned off, including being up and running the entire time I was in Montreal. I will return shortly. And then we will start on Blue. I will preload the page for Blue because the way I have this browser set up, it it carries off from, when I reopen it, it carries off from where I left off. Anyway, I will be back shortly. Um, See you guys in a few minutes.